we say that the way that we grow and we learn in this life is through ratzo shov. This running and retreating, this coming and this going, these ebbs and flows. It's describing the nature of this being, of this reality. Like we have ups and we have downs. We breathe in and we breathe out. And in organic intelligence, we take this oscillatory nature into account. That's what makes it so effective. And I've yet to come across another approach or roadmap or modality out there that really works with our oscillations on a biological, physiological level, the way that organic intelligence does. And it's also comprehensive. It's taking the whole being, our whole psyche into consideration. There's also this verse in Kabbalah that I think it's from the Sefer Yetzirah that says, libacha, shov למקום. If your heart races, come back to the place. So I've even got it written down here. So if you can see, libacha, shov למקום. Shuv, this word shuv, which means come back, return, sit. And there's part of the word teshuvah. Teshuvah, this word that can be translated as repentance, but also as a return or a remembering, can also be an answer and our ability to respond to teshuvah. So let's talk about our ability to respond, our ability to come back here, to the here and now, to this moment, and our ability to then be able to respond to what's happening now. I think of different ways that our heart can run. You know, when are the different ways that ratz libacha? And I think one of them can be when we have fight, flight, and freeze survival responses running the show. And so I might have certain responses and states in a moment that, for example, fight, flight, and freeze states when there isn't necessarily a danger or threat in the immediate environment. And so I have a sense of urgency. I might feel anxious. I might feel worried and concerned when the moment itself that's happening now is not really indicating for that. So our hearts can get carried away, and shov למקום, coming back to place. Makom is the place. So I think of organic intelligence in this way, this coming back to the okayness of now and how my physiology can really take in the makom, the place where I am now, and be able to get the feedback of the okayness of now. And I think of another time where our hearts can race when we get really excited about something. You know, maybe we've met somebody new and we're falling in love and there's this big heart opening and we can get so carried away, right? We can, start planning too far ahead, making future plans. We already planned our marriage and how many children we're going to have for a person we met, last week. And then we can actually miss the cues of the moment, right? And now this can land up in a situation with a toxic or unhealthy person where you can actually miss cues in the moment because you've gotten ahead in a fantasy or an idea of somebody. And so we can then find ourselves not actually hearing what someone's telling us. Like Maya Angelou says, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. And our ability to actually hear what somebody's telling us in the moment has so much to do with our orientation to this makom, to this place. If we've gotten ahead of ourselves, then we can miss those cues, and that can land up really dangerous. And we can also, in a healthy situation, we can overinvest in a relationship or in a person when it's not really called for in the moment. And the thing is, though, is that when we do that, we are actually not available for the love and intimacy that we are wanting. Because if I'm getting carried away with my heart's getting carried away into the fantasy and the hope of the future and some dream down the road, and I'm not able to come back to the here and now moment and pick up on what is actually happening between us, then I'm actually missing out on what is really happening now, and then I'm missing out on the real intimacy of the moment. And also in this situation, if there's a healthy person, when they tell us where they are and what's important to them, we can actually hear it. And we can take that in as feedback, and in the moment we can respond to tshuva, we can respond appropriately in the moment. And this can also save us a bunch of heartbreak, because essentially what is heartbreak if it's not, there's lots of reasons why our hearts can be broken. But in terms of coming into relationship, we can sometimes have an idea and a fantasy of how we want this relationship to be with this person, and then we get carried away and they land up to not be that, and so we kind of sometimes are mourning that gap between what we wished or we wanted to happen and what is actually happening. So that brings me to Oprah's definition of forgiveness, and also teshuvah, which is letting go of the hope of the past being any different than it has been. So there is another way that our hearts can get carried away. Libacha shov למקום is also referencing Ezekiel's dream. And he's talking about not getting carried away in the contemplation and meditation of the Sefirot in Kabbalah. So we can get carried away in the vision and in this contemplation and seeking spiritual heights. And we can then want to just keep chasing that, keep going for that. But we need to remember that every up also has a down. Sometimes we find ourselves just seeking the up because we want to just experience that unity and that closeness and that love. But then what happens when we come down? Sometimes even when we are in a more chaotic physiological state, and we've got the negative reinforcement that we talk about in organic intelligence, that coming down from that kind of, spiritual height can really feel like something's gone wrong, that we somehow are off our path, that we had this revelation and this big understanding and this big insight, and now when we're coming down from that high, that wave, we think something's gone wrong, I'm off my path. But there's a way for us to work with these cycles that we do in organic intelligence, that is about being able to enjoy both coming up and coming down. So ratz ליבך shov למקום. So if our hearts get carried away, when they get carried away, how are we able to come back to the makom? And the easefulness and smoothness of those transitions between these oscillations is really going to say a lot about our bandwidth and our capacity to meet life in all of its challenge and beauty. And we can grow our capacity through love.